This is the Pro Audio Suite podcast. Quick Bites.
Welcome to another Quick Bite, thanks to Rode Microphones and Harlan Hogan's VoiceOver Essentials, the home of the Portabooth Pro. This week, we're on the diving board about to plunge into a geek pool.
Again.
Yeah, again. This week, we're looking at a new microphone from a new microphone company that formed in 2017. Basically, AKG shut their factory down in 2017 in Vienna, and all their R&D engineers were out of work. So they formed their own company and called it AUSTRIAN Audio. But at the time the factory was shut down, they were working on some R&D to develop the old CK12 capsule. They took that R&D with them and developed their own capsule, which they call the CKR12. And the main difference is, instead of using brass, which was so unreliable with a gazillion screws in it, they've made a ceramic ring for their capsule. It looks like an absolute winner. But what does it sound like? I managed to get my hands on one and had a bit of a play. And we're going to compare it to a couple of other classic microphones with classic capsules, and also play around with this Polar Pattern plugin you can use in post.
Called Polar Designer.
Polar Designer, indeed, as opposed to Polar Express.
Or Polar Bear.
His favorite Christmas movie.
Is it melting?
Probably is, as we speak. So, do you want to start off by just doing, playing the three different microphones, just to get an idea of what it sounds like?
Okay.
I don't want to hear Andrew's voice anymore.
Okay. Now it's time for me to read a book. We're all sitting comfortably. This is the Microtech Gefell M92.1S. Okay, so this is the OC818 from Austrian Audio. Okay, this is the C414EB P48. All right, so what do we think? So we had the Microtech Gefell with the M7 capsule, we had the 414 with the CK12 nylon capsule, and then we had the OC818 from Austrian Audio. What were your thoughts?
It sounded a lot like the 414, but not quite as thick and surprisingly not a lot like the M7, which I thought initially would be.
It's funny you should say that, because I sent the file last night across to Jeff Silverman. And his initial response was, he said thought it actually the 818 sounded very much like the Gefell.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought the 818 was a little bit closer to the Gefell than the 414, but I definitely thought the 818 and the 414 sounded more similar.
What do you think,
That was
Jeff?
the impression I had.
Okay.
414, 818 were very similar. The rich, full sound. The Gefell to me sounded thinner. I didn't hear as much low end going on.
And the 818 was not quite as rich as the 414, right?
I wasn't monitoring on the best monitoring setup, so I'd have to really dial it in to discern a difference.
I have to reassess the low end of the M7 because the top end seemed to get so much attention to me on that. So the M7 definitely had a little bit harsher, not harsher, but just not even harsh isn't the right word. It just had a brighter, airier top end than the others. That's what I heard. So it just seemed to be a little bit more emphasis on the brightness. That's what I heard from the M7. But the 414 and the 818 were rather similar based on what those guys were saying. I think they're the closest between the three of them.
Robbo?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the AKG and the Austrian Audio are the closest two out of the lot.
I know my hearing's not the best, as we've discussed on many occasions, but to me, I kind of heard the 818 being a combination of both. It kind of had that sort of top-end sheen of the M7, but had the sort of more lower mids and stuff like that from the 414. That's kind of what I heard.
That would be a good point.
I think of the three, I liked the 818 better of all three. It seemed to have the warmth that the 414 had with not quite as heavy-handed, not so murky as the 414.
Yeah.
The Goldilocks mic.
Yeah.
As it were.
I've also been using it in figure 8, and it does sound quite different in figure 8. And it's pretty impressive.
What
we heard was just the front capsule. In other words, we heard half of the mic.
Correct.
So we also have samples of the whole mic where you recorded the front and the rear capsule. And then some of us some of us had the moment in the day, not all of us because it was a busy day, to take that said file, throw it into Polar Designer, and come up with our own microphone sound. Basically, just we got to take that front and rear capsule and just give it our own flavoring with the Polar Designer. So I uploaded one and sent it by email. Maybe you have it. And I kind of went the route of slam all the faders to the top. So what I did was I just put every single thing in figure 8. Okay. And so I thought that'd be interesting because you did record a sample in figure 8, didn't you?
Yeah, I did, yeah.
Just so I thought it'd be interesting to hear how my figure 8 with Polar Designer compared to the figure 8 that comes right out of the mic. Are they exactly the same? How similar are they? I happen to think it sounded really damn good. I really liked the mic and figure 8.
Did you notice
mode.
any difference?
I didn't have a chance to compare, actually.
You didn't have a chance to A/B?
No,
I mean, because there's a lot going on there. I mean, Polar Designer, especially if it's going through each band, it means that everything's going through like a whole crap load of filters and then it's being reassembled. Whereas when the microphone does it inside the microphone, it's just electronically mixing those things together without ripping it apart frequency-wise and putting it back together.
Well, that's what's interesting. So there's two different Polar Designers. There's the Polar Designer software that's a plugin, and that's a post-process, although you could probably plug it into it, insert it in, Pro Tools, and then track through it, of course.
You can see what music sounds like through it. Just put a stereo thing through it and see what happens.
Yeah, and then there is the Polar Designer app. And so what that thing does is it runs on your iPhone, and then using a special Bluetooth module that plugs into the rear of the mic, it now allows you to do the same kind of control over the patterns internally, inside the mic, electronically. So the mic has a bunch of presets. It's got your typical
frequency controls in the iPad
Well,
app?
here's the thing. I have not had the opportunity to use the app. So I don't know if it also has frequency control.
Interesting if the mic inside of itself had all that frequency sectioning off.
Have you gotten a chance to play with that, Andrew?
No, I didn't get the dongle. It's an extra thing you can buy for the microphone. But what I do know is you can't play with the frequencies. You could, with the app on your phone. You can adjust your polar patterns. You can do your high pass filters and pads and whatever. Which
Proximity
I can see
effect,
that.
But you.
No pads. It's just basically the microphone. So it's polar patterns, pads, and high pass.
It's brilliant though with Bluetooth. So somebody at a mixer can control the pattern while he's hearing the performer on a stage or something, and make adjustments as necessary in real time, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and it's handy. Like if you're, like if you've got room mics or stuff that you don't have to climb ladders anymore. You can sit actually in the control room and adjust what polar pattern you want. You may want more room, less room, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear George's file?
Joystick.
Yeah. Okay, this is the Austrian Audio OC818. I've plugged in both capsules separately. The front capsule should be on the right channel and the rear capsule should be on the left channel. You can adjust now the polar patterns in 5 different frequencies and also adjust the proximity using the Austrian Audio app. Let's see how it sounds. Okay, so we're starting off with the Austrian Audio OC818. I've got it set on the figure 8, and I've got the high pass set on 80. So that's figure 8.
So what did you do, George?
Okay.
You flipped everything to figure 8. Is that right?
I admit I did more than I said. So I did flip everything to figure 8, but I messed with the EQ. So,
Thought so. Yeah.
You're probably noticing it sounds a tad bright. About 3.3 dB bright. Yeah. So I boosted the top capsule, or it's the top band by 3.3. Mm-hmm. So it was pretty bright. And then I did add 1 dB on the low mid band and 1.8 on the low band. And I cranked up the proximity control to 0.69. So that was definitely not flat. But I was just curious if you guys thought that was actually good sounding, or if it was too much. Maybe it sounds too bright, or too this, or too that.
I didn't mind it.
What is reverse pattern?
Honestly, there's definitely some RTFMing that has to go on here because I do not know what that means. But yeah.
The thing that occurred to me was it's probably my first thought, to be honest with you, was that I didn't know where I would use it. I thought it was a great function, but I didn't know where I would use it. But then I was sort of thinking about it a bit, and I was wondering, it's sort of with radio imaging, you use filter effects a lot. So the music's thick and out there, and then you sort of, you automate your EQ and you add some other effects, and it sort of thins out and comes back. Everyone would know what I'm talking about if you heard it. And I was wondering if you could take that plugin in Pro Tools and take that similar sort of effect, that thinning out sort of effect that we use on music, put it on a voiceover, but as well as changing the EQ, change the polar pattern. So sort of move it from the front to the back. So as well as you get that mechanical sort of EQ, you also get almost a recorded EQ. Does that make sense? Am I making sense? Am I?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
so instead of using a plugin, you would just use the actual microphone's recording.
So automate that actual plugin. So as well as automating the EQ, you're also changing maybe from the front to the back. So as well as it thinning out, it's getting more distant, sort of. You know what I mean? So I would sort of, that would be something that I'm actually going to sit down and play with once we're done here and sort of see.
I just want to know what a music track sounds like through that plugin.
Yeah,
that's true, because this plugin, this Full Designer plugin, they have the AAX, VST, and an AU, and it's an open source plugin.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's free to anyone, to all to use. So you can throw anything you want through this plugin.
Yeah.
And go crazy with it. So you can definitely do some weird stuff.
What do you think this microphone's best suited to record? It seems like overkill for voiceover.
It's definitely a musical thing, I would suggest. Yeah.
I don't see why it can't be used for voiceover and give you a lot of flexibility.
Here's an example.
What's the price point?
What does it cost? About $1,000 US?
$1,000 US.
That's not bad. I mean, a quality mic is going to cost you $600 to $1,000 anyways, and this one's got some flexibility. Yeah. It's a little bit more than the Lewitt that does the same thing, right?
I think does the Lewitt do the same thing?
I think you could throw the Lewitt through this open source software, because it really does the same thing, which is here's the front and back of the capsule, and now game's over. It's all the same stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's at $1,000. You can buy a matched. Well, they're all matched because they're saying basically the difference between the capsules is half a dB plus or minus. So you can basically
they're essentially all matched.
They're all matched, yeah. But I kind of, like we talk about the voiceover thing, I've got to say, for me, I think this thing is fantastic.
I like it.
I'm not going to use all the bits and pieces, but, people buy a $3,500 U87. I know what I'd rather buy, and it's certainly
and put it in a closet. Yeah. Can I go on a sidebar? Because we've been doing this a lot tonight. So earlier today, I was helping a client. She couldn't get good sound out of her studio. She was using the following: a U87, an Apollo Twin, in a closet lined with Roxol AFB, fire, decent treatment, right. But it sounded like garbage, right? And no matter what we did, it sounded like garbage. So I'm like, let me see what you're doing on, what software you're using? Oh, GarageBand? Okay, let's take a look at what you're doing in GarageBand. I loaded GarageBand and I was like, what is going on? There was so much processing going on, EQ and all this stuff. Was like, wait a minute. And I tell you, I look at GarageBand for 2 minutes. My eyes just rolled in the back of my head. I'm like, let's install Twisted Wave. Okay, this will take 2 minutes. Installed Twisted Wave, recorded a single mono track, played it back, and it was like, OMG. It was like, all of a sudden, it sounded exactly the way it should sound. It sounded great, actually. So I know I'm sidebarring here, but guys, don't go out and buy a $3,000 mic and not know how to use your free GarageBand software on your Mac. Please don't make that mistake.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I've used the L22, the Sphere. That's the one from Townsend Labs. And it's essentially a very expensive version of, this mic. Very well made, blah, blah, blah. A little bit more flexible. It has a little bit more tweakability. But I think that for me, as an engineer who does remote tech support and remote booth tuning, is to give somebody this mic and for me to fix the polar pattern to work better with their voice and their, not great studio. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Is it overkill? Yeah. And here's the thing. I wish I could remote control that internal setting over the internet, because it's an app. So I'd like to be able to remote control the pattern via the internet over screen share and then store it in the mic and say, here's your setting. never, ever, ever change this. That would be, to me, the ultimate custom designed microphone for the voice actor. This would be the only mic I know of that I could do that, where I custom designed the polar pattern and the EQ of the mic, store it in memory, and that's their mic. Yeah. And that to me is pretty compelling. Does the average voice actor need that? Probably not. But for me as an engineer, that is the ultimate control freak scenario, which makes me very excited.
I just think it seems to be a good, well-balanced microphone. It's sort of sits right in between that Gefell and the 414. Gives you a lot of options. Doesn't seem to be priced overly expensive.
Right.
I don't know.
It's reasonable.
It seems to kind of check a lot of boxes. It's not necessarily the mic for everybody, but
it's a solid price point. And if you never touch a single plugin or software or do a damn thing and just put it on cardioid, it sounds great.
It's going to work.
Yeah.
And that's, a good mic needs to sound great with nothing being done to it, right? And it does sound great without playing around with or mucking about with it.
So, garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. So that's good. That's a good thing.
And if you don't want all the polar patterns, they also do the cardioid only, which is the OC18.
The 18, right?
How much is that one?
I think US dollars is $699. Yeah, $700.
That's a solid proposition.
So at that point, it's competing more with like a 214 or something.
Maybe a TLM 102 or Mojave FET 201 or there's a lot of like $700 price point mics. The AT 4047 I like a lot.
You don't think the 214 is a contender?
It's not as nice sounding. Definitely not as nice sounding.
It's not 414 like.
Well, which 414?
Probably something like a ULS or maybe a later XL2, not an XL2, maybe an XLS. One of those generations of 414. I'd expect the 214 to sound like those. But if they don't, then I'm wrong. Never used it.
It's good. It's not great. Yeah.
Yeah. The one thing that is really impressive about this microphone is the build quality. It's extremely well built. It looks fantastic.
And it's skinnier than the 414, right?
It's got a slightly bigger profile than the 414, and it's a modern looking microphone. It's
its own thing. But they really just,
it looks kind of like the JZ mic.
Chassis,
right?
Grill, everything. Like it's just a completely from the ground up design.
It's even got this strange thing inside where the capsule is mounted. They put a miniature diffuser in there to stop reflections. Yeah, to stop reflections off the actual body of the mic heading into the capsule. Wow. That's clever.
Jeez, that's pretty amazing. Yeah. Well, it's a killer mic. I mean, I recommended a Peluso P414. 44, I don't even know how to say the names of these mics. We've screwed them up so bad.
Confused.
But I recommended it to a lady talent recently because it's essentially the closest thing you can buy, at least until now, to an EB, the 414 EB. So the P414 is very EB-like, very beautiful sounding, very smooth. In fact, it says right in here, we drew heavily from the 1976 EB version. So it does certainly sound like it, and it's smooth and sounds wonderful in figure eight pattern. It's a little spendier, but it's a very interesting competitor. I'd like to throw that mic into the shootout mix someday and hear how that stacks
the Peluso
up.
Mic.
The Peluso, yeah.
What was the model number again?
P414.
I'm writing this down.
I love Peluso because it literally is a 3-person team, husband and wife. The wife does a lot of the fabric, like a lot of the soldering. And, in Virginia, and they just make these mics in their little shop in Virginia, but they're sold on some of the biggest websites on,
Peluso's
retailers.
got a great reputation. I've only heard wonderful things about those mics, but I've never actually bought one myself.
I got a P67 for one of my clients who had two U67s, original U67s, which were becoming, a little bit of a maintenance problem. We were like rotating them back and forth between the tech and Burbank, It was getting a little ridiculous. I was like, let's just try a modern take on the mic. And that ended up taking over. That's the mic that now lives in the studio. And the other one got sold for $9,000. The other one sits in a suitcase in the closet. So let's say it paid for itself.
Sound Deluxe and Bach microphones, what's your take on those?
I don't get to use the real things very often at all. But when I heard the model of the Sound Deluxe 250, is it the 251? Is that the one that's so incredibly well loved?
I think so. I think I just got one and I didn't actually.
It does sound. It did sound pretty damn awesome on who I was trying it with. But that was a model on the L22, the emulator.
Okay.
Which, I don't have all these mics to try out in the real world, but it sounded pretty damn sweet. I can see why people like the Elam 251,
I think around 1999 or 2000, I bought a Sound Deluxe U99, which I just took out of service like 2 months ago. And it also had a figure 8 pattern. I remember experimenting with that on the power supply. You could determine what the pattern would be.
Sure.
But it was it's a tube mic, so it had a really rich, creamy sound. But tube mics are noisy,
Yeah, the interesting thing is the Gefell that was in that test is a tube mic.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have that fat bottom end, which is really interesting.
Well, there's some others that don't. Like the Manley cardioid or reference cardioid, it doesn't have a big fat bottom end on it. It's got a huge amount of attack, like mid-range.
The other thing we haven't talked about is will this microphone or any of the microphones you've mentioned work on different voices? I mean, is it a tonal thing? Will it work on a female? I mean, I'm wondering with the P414, the Peluso, was that a female that you bought that for?
Yeah. Yeah. And, I liked it because, women on, this is, maybe this is the wrong thing to say, but women oftentimes have a brighter voice.
Yeah.
There tends to be more sibilance. There tends to be more, there's more frequency content. So in the upper mid range or upper range. So, a mic that's smoother up there, or dare I say basically flat, sounds nicer. It sounds smoother. And mics that have that shelf on the top end, like a 41.6, and tons of other condenser mics that have like a 4 to 8 dB shelf on the top end, like a high rise on the top end. Yeah. They do not sound so great on somebody that might already be sibilant. So, it just depends. But if you have a flat mic that's accurate and clean with low distortion, really low self noise, you're going to be able to record anybody.
Yeah.
Just EQ it after the fact. Just tune it the way you need to,
Yeah, I do know there's certain, a mate of mine was telling me he had a Bach and he ended up getting rid of it because it worked beautifully on some voices, but others it just sounded crap. So he sold it. I'm kind of curious from what you guys are hearing. Can you imagine, a different voice on this microphone?
Yeah. Why not? I mean, it sounds like it wants to take some EQ, right? It's for your voice, I think it's a very nice match. And for other voices, it might be too dark. And so it would take EQ beautifully. I find myself de-emphasizing 416s a lot, taking out the harshness of them for certain things. And with this mic, I'd find I would almost never have to dip anything out of the mic. I would only be probably adding a little bit here and there for flavor, like I did with that Polar Pattern Designer for you. I added 3 dB here, 1 dB there, and got the flavor I liked, but I didn't take anything away because it just, nothing stood out. Nothing was like, woof, honky, all these weird frequencies that jump out on some odd vintage mics and tube mics and things that have character. Yeah. I don't really like a mic with character. That's not what I'm looking for. I want it to just be smooth.
Well, at the moment I've got it on figure 8. So what I should do, just for the hell of it while we're here, I'll hold your ears. Oh, didn't make any noise. I've now moved it onto cardioid.
And there you go, right out of the, there's a feature right out of the gate. The fact that you can switch patterns and the thing electronically mutes itself.
Yep.
And you have no pops and no horrible sound when you change patterns. Like that's a beautiful thing. I love that,
Yeah. So there you go. That's the cardioid. I think I prefer.
Yeah, it's a little thinner. It's a little thinner and more honky.
Yeah.
A little bit more upper or mid range.
Yep.
So not as nice.
Interesting.
I think once you get used to hearing that figure 8 pattern, everything else sounds kind of thin because it just adds that thing at the low end. And then when you lose it, you miss it. If you didn't hear it in the first place, you may not miss it.
Well, I'm back on figure 8. That, to me, it sounds much better. Yeah.
I like it better.
Yeah, cool.
That's counterintuitive to me that the figure 8 would sound better than the cardioid.
Me too, Jeff. I've just been experimenting with that so much lately. So many people, and I don't know why there's so many U87s all of a sudden. Like I might hear one U87 a month normally, And now it seems like once a week almost. Oh, I have a U87 and I have and I'm like, and I'm plugging it into a Scarlett 2i2 and I'm using my closet and I'm like, what? This doesn't make, I'm scratching my head like, who bought you a U87?
Right. And you're using your U87 with a Scarlett and like.
Yes.
Oh,
I've heard numerous U87s plugged into a $100 preamp many, many, many times.
That's
like
shocking.
it's just, what am I going to tell them? Like, what were you thinking? I can't really go there most of the time. I just say, well, let's get the best sound we can out of the mic you have. Like, I think it's an incredibly
I think they bought one piece
overpriced
that's an investment piece, and then they keep on moving on. And the next thing they replace is their preamp. Next thing they replace is their converter. Next thing, they just keep on. But at least they got one piece that they don't necessarily need to change ever.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. And a lot of times I don't like the way the mic sounds all that much on the person that bought it, and then I'm just trying to EQ things to sound a little more pleasing. So
yeah,
that's also a thing. It's kind of like it's not the best mic for everyone. I think there's another reason that mic has ended up populating so many home studios in the last 4 months is there was these spec sheets going out from a lot of agents saying, we're being told you have to have a quality home studio. And that might include we suggest you have something like a U87 or a TLM 103. So people get these specs and we're like, well, I guess I better go buy a U87. Now is my chance to buy a U87. I don't know.
Wow.
I'm kind of perplexed about it, but
having everything go into a Scarlett isn't going to make everything before it sound better necessarily. No. I wonder if UAD purposely put a thing on their interfaces that just makes it get hot, just to make it seem like it's like working really hard.
A little heater.
Blowing energy for no reason, just like
you mean like those plastic
resistor.
Cameras that they used to sell that were took its 110 film that looked like a real camera and then they had a lead weight inside so it felt like a real camera.
Right.
The audio interface equivalent of that.
Yeah, it's like it gets really hot, so it must be good.
Yeah.
It freaks people out, I tell you. It gets pretty warm. They were like, is something wrong? I'm like, no, it's an aluminum heat sink and it's designed to radiate the heat. And it has a computer inside. It has a DSP chip and it makes heat. It does that. And there's no fan. So yes.
I am surprised about this with like a lot of music engineers. So they will be the snobbiest and they'll be like, I am not recording my audio through a single chip mic preamp. It must be discrete API or John Hardy or whatever, that microphone. But I love the Unison preamps and their emulation, which is basically, it's got to be going through some single chip, cheap, mass marketed, mass built UA thing. It's like they're making so many of these. It's not like the preamp can be the same as some discrete preamp, but they believe it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
Like, this sounds great. Love it. And it's all about inspiration.
Well, on that note, I think we all kind of agree that the OC818 is pretty good.
I think it's a bit of a winner.
I think so. Yeah, I liked it.
Pretty
You can send
good.
it over here. No problem.
We should all have one.
Nice one.
I'm going to get in trouble for what I said about UA, right?
No.
By
Yeah.
who? Why would you? Yeah. From who?
I don't know. Because I don't even know for sure that it's a single chip preamp in there. I'm kind of making an assumption, but I think it's a fair assumption that it's...
Robert, you would be the first and
can't
only
be.
person. If we took that out, you would be the first and only person to come on this podcast and not speak their mind.
Right. My one assumption that it's not is that the Unison plugin allows you to adjust the impedance of the preamp. So
Right.
I don't think it's a one-chip preamp because it does have the ability to adjust the impedance to match the original
to match the
preamp that you're
microphone
modeling.
input impedance. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like if you load in the API Vision, the impedance of that preamp is what the preamp in the Apollo becomes.
But I don't think it matches it exactly. I think it goes has like 5 settings in it. Like low to high
maybe.
or something.
Yeah,
gotta be
like the
tree of resistors.
ISA preamps from Focusrite, they have like 4 settings.
Exactly.
This has been real and really interesting. And thanks, Jeff. Thanks for hanging out with us.
This show was mixed by Voodoo Sound, edit by Andrew Peters, using Source Connect Now and Rode microphones, with technical support from George the Tech Whittam. Don't forget to subscribe and like us.
You look for trouble.